All right, welcome back. This is part 3. These are all the other players not mentioned: forwards, defensemen, goaltenders. There's none on the board. I can tell you why later. But some of these guys should crack the NHL lineup come opening day. Some of these guys will not. Some of these guys will see time up at the NHL level, and some of these guys won't. At this point, there's a lot that could happen with a lot of these guys, and I think a lot of these guys can make a strong case for a call-up and a look, at the very least, should they not make the roster. But I want to start off by talking about Murat Hustadinov. This is a player I absolutely love. He got married this summer. Kirill Kaprizov was in attendance in the wedding, so that was really exciting. Murat Hustadinov is Russian, 23-year-old centerman, can play wing as well, but I think he's been pretty good and solid as a centerman. Can take faceoffs, kind of play that responsible two-way type of hockey. Pretty good in his own zone, pretty responsible defensively, fast, got a lot of speed. I probably know more about Hustadinov than anyone else on this board because I love this player so much. I look at him so much. This is a player who really went off in the KHL as a young kid. I think up until the age of 21 when he came over here. I'm not going to pull up his stats. Might have been 20, might have been 21. I think it was 21. 23 now. But spent his first 2 seasons in Minnesota with the Wild. Really didn't see much valuable ice time. It was a lot of fourth line. He was really exclusively put on the fourth line with some grinder guys. Not a whole lot of skill, no speed. So we didn't really see what Hustadinov was able to offer. This is a guy that should be placed in a second line role or a third line role with skilled wingers to really see what he has at the NHL level. We haven't seen that to this point. Even with the Bruins this past season, he was traded at the trade deadline in that Lauko trade. This is part of the Bruins acquisition. We didn't see him utilized a whole lot, but he was decent. He signed for 2 more years at $925,000. With the Bruins this past year, he played 18 games, had 3 goals, 2 assists for 5 points. He was a second overall pick. This is a guy who was flirting with a point per game for quite some time in the KHL. So it'd be fun to see him play with some skill guys as opposed to some, bottom line grinder type guys. Spent a lot of time playing with Yakov Trenin, so that was fun. Not much happened there, I can tell you that much. But interesting nonetheless. I'd love to see him in the lineup and get some valuable ice time. So we'll see. Again, I already talked about the forwards and kind of how their roster's already set up and some of the signings they've made to fill some of those roster spots. I think it leaves a bit of an issue and there's a lot of young guys that really should start to get some type of legitimate look at the NHL level, get some type of legitimate opportunity rather than being thrown on a fourth line with a couple of guys who can throw fists but can't throw pucks at the net. So you can see what these guys actually have and are capable of. So with that being said, we're moving on to Fraser Minten. This is a highly touted prospect. He was received in Boston from the Brandon Carlo deal, I believe. He signed for 2 more years at $816,000. Saw 6 games with the Bruins last year and just 1 goal in those 6 games. He was a former second-round pick. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't seen this kid play too much, and honestly, the sample size we saw as a Bruin last season, I don't really know what to make of it. But statistically speaking, throughout his career, his progression throughout leagues and so on, nothing really jumps out the page. But at the same time, there's a lot of people saying this is a very highly touted prospect. Maybe. I don't know. The stats would say I probably not, but at the same time, I don't know what this kid's capable of. I don't know his skill set. I don't know what teams he's been on. So I can't tell you a whole lot. But I know this is one of the kids that is probably should be seeing NHL ice time this season. I think these 2 guys can go without saying. I also don't have Will Zellers on the board. He is not officially signed. I didn't realize there were so many guys that could vie for some NHL time this year. So these are just the signed players. I'll do a whole thing about unsigned players, and I'm going to try to be as transparent as I can with my knowledge about these guys, because some of them there's really not a whole lot of knowledge. I'm not going to lie, but I don't want to give you wrong information. Moving on to Bancroft. Bancroft's 22, played 5 games with Providence last year. 1 goal in those 5 games. Signed for a 1-year contract at $950,000. He was undrafted and from the NCAA. He played pretty well in the NCAA. I wouldn't be overly surprised to see him get a shot in the lineup. Maybe this year. I think it's going to be tough for him to get into the lineup this year with all the competition. It might be one of those guys where he chills at the AHL. It's going to be kind of a make or break year for him at the AHL. If he does well, great. I'm sure he'll get a shot. If he doesn't, I don't really know what's next for him in his career. Maybe he gets another extension for an AHL contract, or maybe he goes overseas. This is a big deal, or a big year for Bancroft. We'll see what happens. I probably wouldn't expect to see him up at an NHL level this year, but given his past tenure at the NCAA, it could very well happen. This is a make or break year for him at the AHL, in my opinion. And it's still early, so we'll see. Blumel, I think, is very interesting. 25-year-old player, signed 1-year contract for $875,000. Played 7 games with Dallas last year, just 1 goal. But he has been tearing up the AHL, and his trajectory in the AHL he's been getting better and better every year. So last year, the same year as with Dallas, last year, 67 games, 39 goals, 33 assists for 72 points. That's fantastic. So we'll see if that ends up translating to NHL success, or if it could be, maybe a great AHL player that never really goes beyond that, right? Kind of like a Chris Bourque, if you remember that. And I liked Chris Bourque a lot, too. Next up, we got Viel, 28 years old, signed 1 year at $775,000. 5 games in the NHL last year with the Bruins, no points. So you're going to start to notice a trend. 3 of these guys, have seen time with the Boston Bruins, and 4 of the 5 guys we've talked about have seen NHL time last season. So here you go. This starts to get a little difficult. Fabian Lysell, former first round pick. He's 22 right now. Signed for 1 year at $863,000. Spent 12 games with the Bruins last year. 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points. I think there were flashes of his, reasons why he went in the first round. Sorry, it's been a long day, man. But he wasn't quite putting it all together in certain games. Some shifts, he looked fantastic. Others, he was not noticeable and kind of looked like a lost puppy at times. So it'll be curious to see what they do with Lysell. If they keep him in the AHL, try to develop him a little more. Had kind of a down year in the AHL. 52 games played, 11 goals, 23 assists for 34 points. He's been kind of leveling out at the AHL level to be about 60% point rate per game. We'll see. This is a guy that has a lot of skill. I think could use some time in an NHL lineup on a regular basis and get acclimated to that style of game. So I'm curious to see what the Bruins do with Lysell this upcoming season. I'm going to keep an eye on that for sure. I'm not going to lie, I have no idea how to say this guy's name. Lockmelis, I think. He's 21, just signed his entry-level deal, $860,000 for 3 years. Providence last year, 6 games, 3 goals, 9 assists for 12 points. 12 points in 6 games. I don't know. What? I don't know if that's a mistype or if those were really the numbers he put up. He was a 4th-round pick. I think he played at Cornell, and he had good stats, about a point per game, right? Nothing, for the NCAA, those are pretty good stats. Sometimes that translates really well into NHL and AHL play, and sometimes that does not translate whatsoever. So we'll see, but that's encouraging if that's what he's showing in his first 6 games at an AHL level. If he keeps up production even at half the rate of what he did, he could see a call-up pretty soon. He's 21, but he's played in the NCAA, so, it's not as egregious to call up a 21-year-old who's played in leagues like that over, say a guy like Lysell who has played OHL and AHL. So, it's good. Not saying one or the other should be called up first. It's not my job, thank goodness. Next up, we got Steves, 25 years old, signed for 1 year, $850,000. He played 7 games in Toronto last year, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. Undrafted from the NCAA. Might be getting confused now. A lot of these guys, as we know with Don Sweeney, are from the NCAA. Maybe Steves was at Cornell. I don't know. Both of them had pretty good NCAA stats, so I remember that. One of these guys was at Cornell, one of these guys was not. Anyway, Steves could be an interesting guy to break the lineup this year as well. Again, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys we've talked about. I don't know what the word is for that. Spoken about? Is that proper? Anyway, 6 guys we've talked about already that have already seen NHL ice time last year, are still young, still developing. So there's that. We're moving on to Patrick Brown now. Age 33, 15 games with the Bruins last year, just 1 assist, signed at $775,000 for a year. This is a veteran player, right? Well, this is where we'll start to see the preferences of Don Sweeney, the GM, in addition to Marco Sturm, the coach. Do they prefer a veteran presence when they're calling people up, or are they preferring to develop these young kids? I hope they bring up some of these young kids and develop them. That's important. You need to develop and bring in young talent to sustain a successful franchise. If you're not, you're often left on an old aging team, and eventually you're overspending in free agency or via the trade market. And a lot of these guys are your assets to trade to get a veteran or an upgrade at a certain position. So, well, I'm not sure. We might see Patrick Brown this year. I like the guy. He wouldn't be my first call up. He probably wouldn't be my 4th call up. We also have Riley Tufte. He's now the age of 27, signed for 1 year at $775,000. 6 games with the Bruins last year, 0 points. I was really rooting for this kid. I really was. He did not look great in any of those games this past season. He had a couple solid shifts, but other than that, in the 6 games, it wasn't great. So I don't know if we'll see a call-up from him again. Knowing Don Sweeney, I think we'll see Tufte this year, but from an NHL standpoint, kind of just like a fan and, wanting to see this team improve for the future because they're not going to be all that great this season, you want to see them invest in these younger kids and develop. So we'll see. Next up, Ferrancini. I thought it was Ferrancini. Yeah, Ferrancini. No. Farinacci. I thought Jack Edwards said Ferrancini at one point a long time ago. Kid's 24. So I do apologize. It's a name I'm going to consistently screw up. Seems like a good kid, though. $775,000 is what he signed for 1 year. Last year he played 1 game in the NHL and scored a goal, so that's exciting. That's great. But, again, another player with NHL ice time last year. Providence, he played 58 games, 10 goals, 28 assists for 38 points. He was a 3rd-round pick. Yeah, all right. I wasn't sure if I was skipping the rounds of picks or whatever. I just want to make sure I'm being consistent. So Ferrancini might see ice time this year. I would probably be a little surprised unless he absolutely explodes with Providence. But again, you saw it this year. You never know. Grigory Merkulov. I love Merkulov a lot. 24 years old. Signed for $775,000 for 1 year. Played 6 games in the NHL last year with Boston. 1 assist. That's it. 59 games in Providence last year. 15 goals, 39 assists for 54 points. He's usually, I think the past 3 seasons, he's been around a point per game. Two-way centerman. He is a centerman. I do like him a lot. I think the jump from Providence to Boston for him, the first few games were difficult. It's a different pace. It's a different style of play. And I think the first few games he got called up, not this past season, but prior, you could see there was a bit of a transition struggle there. This past season, I thought he looked great. I don't think he was put in positions to succeed or really score. So I'd like to see him, if implemented into the lineup, put in a better position than he has been in past years. I think this is a guy that has shown promise, even in these 6 games where he only had 1 assist. I thought he looked good for some of those games. So he's another interesting one. We'll see what happens with him. I think a lot of these guys, a lot of the signings that Don Sweeney did this summer to bring in some of these bottom 6 bigger guys that can drop the gloves, really limits the chances of some of these other younger guys getting opportunities, like a Merkelov. All of a sudden, there's a lot of players he's playing with in Providence that have had NHL experience last year and are still young. So it's going to be tough. But that's really it for forwards. There's unsigned players as well. I'll dive into that at some point. And Will Zellers is included in that list. He's not currently signed. But we're moving on to defensemen. Frederick Brunette, he's always listed as a defenseman and a centerman. And I know he's one of those guys that can play both positions. But at this point, he's 21. He's been in the AHL for a couple of years. Like, have we not decided on a position yet? Or I don't know. He did play 1 game in Boston last year, and it was on defense. No points, no goals, no assists, which is fine. Again, another guy with some exposure to the NHL last year. He signed at 1 year for $860,000. Providence last year, 69 games played, 5 goals, 20 assists for 25 points. So, it's the depth, I think, it's a little thinner on the blue line in the AHL than it is for the forward groups. But there's still some competition. I don't know what the quality of competition is. Again, defensemen are tougher to read. But we're moving on to Max Wayner, 22 years old, signed for 1 year at $828,000. Providence last year, 15 games played, just 3 assists. And in Bakersfield, the Bakersfield Condors he played for with the AHL last year as well. 22 games played, 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points. He was a 7th round pick. This is a guy who's a defensive defenseman. At least that's what his numbers would be indicative of. So we'll see. I can't tell you if he's going to be good defensively or not. I have no idea, because those are the toughest players to determine based off of stats how good they are at playing defense, right? If that's what they're going to do. So there's Wayner. We got Michael Callahan, played 17 games with the Bruins last year, just the 1 goal. He's a former 5th overall pick by the Coyotes, I think. Arizona, maybe? Don't quote me on that. Signed at 1 year for $775,000. I don't know if I just said that. This is very much a guy that's probably the first call-up. We're moving on to Jordan Harris. I'd expect Harris to be that 7th defenseman on opening night. He signed for 1 year at $825,000. Played 33 games with Columbus last year. 1 goal, 4 assists for 5 total points. Yeah, I don't have much. I haven't really watched Harris too much. I've seen games where he's played in, but he's not usually the defenseman I'm focusing in on for those games. So I'm excited to see more of Jordan Harris, get a better feel on him and his game. But we're moving on to Soderstrom. Soderstrom is 24 years old. He's an interesting guy. He was drafted 11th overall. He's a first-round pick, I believe, by the Arizona Coyotes. And not this past season, but the year before, in Tucson with their AHL team, played 69 games, had 9 goals, 23 assists for 32 points. the brain is not working anymore. And with Arizona in the same year, he played 3 games with no points. This past season, he went to the SHL to play. Played 49 games, 9 goals, 28 assists for 37 points. Again, this is a defenseman, so I don't know if he's more of an offensive defenseman and has been struggling with the defense. I really don't remember much about his game. I'm not gonna lie, but one of those interesting guys. Could be a diamond in the rough. Could turn out to be nothing, but you don't know if you don't try. Nonetheless, former highly touted prospect with NHL experience, went to the SHL and did really well. Has some great stats. Didn't put his team name from the SHL on the board because I have no idea how to pronounce it. I'm not even going to try because I'm going to butcher it, and I don't want to butcher foreign names. I'm already doing enough butchering. So this, Soderstrom could be an interesting guy to watch. And Billy Sweezy, $775,000 for 1 year. He's 29 years old. And with Providence last year, he had 1 goal, 9 assists for 10 points. Again, 29 years old. He saw NHL time a few years ago. I got to look this up. He's a right-handed shot if you care. With the Columbus Blue Jackets in the 2022-2023 season. 9 games, 1 assist, 9 penalty minutes. So that's this. I think there's a lot of forwards that could vie for a spot, a call-up at the very least, if not make the roster. I'd expect Mitten and Hustadinov to make the roster right out of camp. The rest, who knows? I don't think Mitten or Hustadinov's spots are necessarily safe. Some of these guys like Bancroft, Blumel, I think is a really interesting one. He might actually get a spot out of camp over one of these guys. There's guys, right? Defense, I think, is pretty much set to open up the season. I think we'll see Harris. I think Callahan will probably be the first call-up. We might see Soderstrom on the block or, Brunette. If there's a really big need for a right-handed depth defenseman, Sweezy might get a call-up. I don't know if he'll see playing time, but, there's depth for call-ups. The quality of depth is yet to be seen. We don't really know. We don't know how Blumel will translate into an NHLer. Great at the AHL. 1 goal in 7 games with Dallas. I don't know what situation he was put in with Dallas. Sometimes in Dallas, occasionally does this really well. Sometimes some of these prospects, they'll bring them in and put them in a top 6 role right off the bat. And sometimes they'll throw them on a 4th line and just hope for the best, and it doesn't work out. And sometimes it does, But we'll see. There's a lot of question marks, but there's a lot of guys with potential. I think some of these guys will hit. Some of these guys will probably miss at the NHL level. I think a lot of these guys will have solid AHL careers, but it's too early to tell. There's not a whole lot of veterans down here aside from Patrick Brown and Riley Tufte. And at the same time, I'd rather not these two be the first call-ups. I'd rather see some of these other guys get a shot to prove that they're capable. And some of these guys are starting to get a little older, right? You got Bancroft, he's 24. Blumel is 25. Hustadinov is 23, right? Lysel's 22. Steves is 25. So a lot of these forwards are kind of at that point where if they're not getting to the NHL at this point and staying in the NHL, they're probably not going to be future NHL players. So it's kind of make or break for a lot of these guys this year. Defensemen, usually a little more leeway, a little more leash to develop, a little more time. So we'll see what happens, but that's it for this. You got questions, let me know. I'd be happy to research more if you have questions, or if you think I'm saying something wrong, by all means, let me know. This is a safe space, man. We're all friends, so I appreciate you. Take care, all right?